It's sort of just being at ease with the idea that it is okay to be nervous, or it is okay to feel anxious about having that difficult conversation, and it doesn't have to go perfectly. The main thing is that it happens. If you look at something like a wedding speech or a eulogy, there are so many opportunities for it to go, and I'm using bunny ears, I'm using a quotation marks, it wrong. But there's no such thing as wrong. And I think people often get a little bit fearful when they hear someone like me is in the audience, because they think we're going to sit there and judge. And don't get me wrong, we're deeply curious and interested to see how the speech goes. But I think the most interesting part of communication in any form is listening to the authenticity of it, the organicness of it. And that includes all of the mistakes, all of the things you think were a bit clunky or didn't land exactly how you wanted them to. And a good part of the book is about going, I love those mistakes. So should everyone else. And everyone who doesn't like those mistakes has got it wrong.
You're listening to the Sales Today podcast, and I'm your host, Fred Copestake. On this podcast, we explore how sales professionals can develop a modern approach to winning business, the application of virtual selling techniques, how to create meaningful business relationships, and much more. Why not take our free collaborative selling scorecard to see how your sales approach suits today's environment? You'll find a link in the show notes. And welcome to this episode of the Sales Today podcast, where I'm delighted to be joined again, second time, Vista, by Susie Ashfield, author, speech coach, presentation guru,
all of that.
all of that. And yeah, no, firstly, welcome back. It's good to see you here again. And the reason is, amongst others, your new book.
I know. It's very exciting.
It is very exciting. And I want to know a little bit more about it.
Absolutely.
So you can be the first to say what the title is, to start dragging the podcast down and putting a PG rating on
someone, wasn't it? There's always going to be someone to just drag your good podcast's reputation into the mud. I'm glad it's me, Fred. I am.
Yeah, I am too.
The title of the book is called Just Fucking Say It. And the title is really important to the entire ethos of the book, because the book is a communication guide, but the entire ethos of the communication guide is be brave, take a risk. There's no such thing as a difficult conversation if you're willing to have a conversation. And I wanted any potential reader, their first act of rebellion should be that idea that they should walk into a bookshop and say, hello, do you have a copy of Just Fucking Say It? And they will feel immediately better about their ability to speak in public. So even the title of the book is a tip in itself.
So they go and get it. You say, actually, I don't need it anymore.
Everything's good. And that's your money spent well.
Or not spent, because I've done it. And
I'm completely redundant.
I love that. I love that. The very fact. So you're reading this, you've now crossed the barrier.
Yeah.
And so is this purely about presentations then, or is it all elements of communication? Because you kind of intimated there is a bit more than I know you for.
It will certainly help you with a presentation, but it's more holistic than that. It's anything where there is communication. It's how to listen, it's how to ask, it's how to do a eulogy, it's how to do a wedding speech, it's how not to do a wedding speech, more importantly. It's how to ask for what you want. It's everything I hope that people really struggle with when it comes to communication that just feels challenging or sticky or uncomfortable, or you feel like there's a risk of it going wrong.
Okay, so it's an element of the confidence type book, but you being a communication specialist, yeah, you can be as confident as you like, but you've then got to express it. You've got to communicate, say something, do something.
Yeah, in fact, I think chapter number 1 even is not necessarily the idea that you need to have confidence to do this. Confidence, I always think, goes on with your makeup or your suit in the morning. It can be applied and washed off in the evening. It's more about, if you are not confident, how do you go, I'm not very confident at this, but I'm going to fucking say it anyway. And it's sort of just being at ease with the idea that it is okay to be nervous, or it is okay to feel anxious about having that difficult conversation, and it doesn't have to go perfectly. The main thing is that it happens. If you look at something like a wedding speech or a eulogy, there are so many opportunities for it to go, and I'm using bunny ears, I'm using a quotation marks, it wrong. But there's no such thing as wrong. And I think people often get a little bit fearful when they hear someone like me is in the audience because they think we're going to sit there and judge. And don't get me wrong, we're deeply curious and interested to see how the speech goes. But I think the most interesting part of communication in any form is listening to the authenticity of it, the organicness of it. And that includes all of the mistakes, all of the things you think were a bit clunky or didn't land exactly how you wanted them to. And a good part of the book is about going, I love those mistakes. So should everyone else. And everyone who doesn't like those mistakes has got it wrong.
Yeah. It's funny, actually. Sadly, I had to listen to a couple of eulogies recently.
Mm.
And the ones which land are the ones which one might argue aren't technically perfect
Yeah.
because the voice cracks.
Yeah.
If someone just actually breaks down, they start crying, they can't get the words out.
Yeah.
And instantly, because I do look at this stuff, you look around and other people are affected by that. And it's better as a result.
100%. You know, we were talking just before we jumped on about this sort of this cultural thing and different audiences react in different ways. British audiences, I think they really worry about emotions and showing emotions, and it's sort of hardwired in our DNA. And I have so many clients who I help at a eulogy, and this is a question I find absolutely baffling. They say, look, I think I know what I want to say. I've come to you because my question is, what happens if I cry? And the answer is, if you cry, you cry. What is the problem with that? It's a eulogy. If there is ever a time for public crying, it is that. And we've forgotten, I think, that a lot of the time with speeches like eulogy or like a wedding speech, it is an expression of emotion. Lean into it. Don't fight it.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's interesting that you're kind of going down that route as much as the sort of the more corporate stuff.
Yes.
But that's because you don't need emotion in corporate, I suppose.
And you know as well as I do, Fred, that was poking the bear.
Yeah, of course, so was.
Emotions need to come back into corporate speeches, I think. If anything, for too long, we've sort of gone, this needs to be ultra professional. Ultra professional translates as ultra formal, and ultra formal comes across as boring, stats focused. It doesn't matter whether you are doing a talk on coding, fintech, or GDPR. At the source of everything, you will find something that has an emotional basis to it. There is always a story in there somewhere. If you think of the blandest subject matter you can think of, take that subject matter, stick it into a search engine and click news articles, and you will find a really wild, extreme example of that. That's where the stories are. That's where the emotions are. And if you're not playing with people's emotions, it's not going to land well. It's just going to be flat.
Yeah, it's funny actually. I managed to do both on a training session where I was talking to people about it. It was more to do with social media, so similar kind of thing, and about being professional. And I said, oh, show your cat, show your dog, say something funny, do that. And they went, oh, no, we can't do that. It's not professional. And I don't know if I was being particularly grumpy or something, but I said, no, I'll tell you what's not professional. It's what you're doing now because it doesn't work. So what I'm doing, where I will show my cat and I will say something a little bit weird and I'll do something a bit stand out. People look at it and they'll respond. What you're doing, they don't. So let's have a discussion about who's professional.
Oh, I love
And of
it.
course, I was trying to provoke, wasn't I? Because nothing else was really working. So I went down that will get them going.
Yeah.
They
Yeah.
did, to a degree.
Good. I'm glad you challenged it. No, if you're not using emotions, then you're sort of cutting out a core part of humans, and audiences are, if nothing else, humans.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, we talk in sort of marketing or sales terms, don't we? Or that's what you might say. This is any messaging about pain and prize.
Mm.
I mean, those words are deliberate. You talk about the pain, and if you can express that and understand, the problem, the issue, the concern you have, which might
Yeah.
be quite logical, like the data isn't protected. But then you get prison, and you're going to miss your kids growing up, or whatever. Like, oh, actually, that's really quite hurtful. Okay, so the prize on the other side is you got a nice, easy life where you can go on holidays, you're going to chill, you're going to, again, rough and ready type explanation, but that's how we would try to do things, isn't it?
Absolutely. Pain and prize is, dare I say it, I think beyond sales. If you're one of those people who believes that everything is sales, and to an extent that's an argument I can back, then everything is about pain and price. You know, you've given the example of how we sign somebody up to something. But if you look at what I believe to be the greatest speech of all time, which is, of course, I Have a Dream, Martin Luther King Jr., that whole speech is about pain and price. It really follows that formula of this is what we've got and it's awful, it's really horrific and something needs to change. And he contrasts that with, I have a dream. This is what it could be like. And then he paints a picture of a better America. And by the end of that speech, you would sign any contract he put in front of you. And that is a really good example of how I think that pain and prize translation is not just sales. I think it's everything. Really is in the fiber of our being.
Yeah. Is it? I think it was Simon Sinek when he was talking about this. He sort of said, "Notice the guy doesn't stand up and say, 'I have a plan.'"
Yeah.
Yeah, no, well, okay, good for you. Yeah, it's a very
I have a
logical way of
5-point
the
core
steps to that.
value.
Oh, well, let me get my PowerPoint out. I said, okay,
Yeah.
the dream and contrast. Now, contrast's an interesting thing, isn't it?
Mm.
Again, I heard somebody say, and I should be able to drop the link. Might have been you actually. The brain's a contrast machine. We
Mm.
need contrast, and if we got that, we can make sense of stuff, and it kind of has greater impact.
Contrast adds impact, and it also puts things in a place where they're more fathomable. Day and night, soft and hard, all of that language works really well in a speech. Recently, I posted something about a speaker who was, I've forgotten her name, I think it's Mary King, something like that. I'll find you the name. She is a Republican, and she gives a speech in 1992 at the National Republican Convention. And she is unusual, not for being a Republican, but because she is white, female, a married woman. She is middle class, upper middle class, and she's recently realized she's contracted the AIDS virus. And she gives this powerful speech that contrasts things. I mean, she in herself is a contrast, but that's a speech that really moved the dial, because a lot of people thought, well, you know, I know exactly the sort of group that gets this disease. I'm not that group, so I don't even need to worry about it. So I'm not even going to talk about it. And part of her mission in that speech was to raise awareness, break the stigma, and get everyone saying everyone is at risk. And if this is one person's problem, this is everyone's problem. And she uses contrast throughout that speech beautifully, just to get people to really pay attention.
Yeah, I love it. So I don't want to. I'll ask the question. If you say no, go and buy the book. So, are you using contrast in the book then between boring people and interesting people? And you could be on this side, or we don't want to. But look at this side where what you say lands, has impact. People sit up and listen, and it works for you.
No, because in a word, no, Fred.
Okay, well, there you go. Great
No,
question. Next one.
boring is not the worst thing I think a speech can be. If you're
There's
bored,
worse.
oh God, yeah, yeah. If you're boring, the worst thing that's happened is you've missed an opportunity. That's all.
Okay.
And you know what? I'm confident that opportunity will come back round again. So what's the other option? Well, I like to think there isn't one. If you mess up a speech completely, it will be memorable. And also, what's the definition of mess something up? If ever you go to a wedding and you think, oh, the best man hasn't smashed it here, and they've made a few clunky jokes, I guarantee you often the single person laughing in the marquee or the hall will be me. Because I understand what the joke was trying to do. I see the process behind it. I'm laughing, A, because it's funny, and B, just out of respect for you for trying it. So what I'm saying is we live in fear of it going wrong, and wrong doesn't really exist. The only possible exception for that is, of course, Gerald Ratner and his famous speech when he was talking about his company product. He was sort of a Woolworth style organization that he ran. I can't remember the name of it, but he was talking about, you know, these earrings cost.
It's Ratner's. It's named
Yeah,
after himself.
sorry, Ratner. It was Ratner. And there's a reason Ratner's no longer exists, and it's probably this speech. And he sort of holds up these earrings and says, these earrings cost as much as one of our prawn sandwiches. But the great thing is, the prawn sandwich will probably last longer than the earrings. And the whole room is laughing, but his audience just lost faith. I think you have to go a really, really long way in the wrong direction before you totally crash your own company's share price. I've never seen it. That seems to be the only example of it. And, you know, we have at least all learned something from Gerald Ratner's disaster speech.
I've actually heard him speak recently.
Really?
He's a fantastic speaker.
Tell me
He's
more.
really, really good telling the story, what happened, what he was trying to do. And actually, as a presentation skills coach, you go, that speech was bang on because for
Yeah,
your audience, that message was perfect. They
yeah,
all got it.
yeah.
It was just the journalist who was sat there that took it and put it in the paper the next day, or when it all started to unravel. But I
That
think there is a new contender though. I don't know if you looked at LinkedIn yesterday or today,
no.
with you've not seen the boob gate.
Boobgate? What's
There's
Boobgate?
there's a chap, so it's a bloke who's compared marketing strategy to boobs
Brilliant. I
and
must look at
the
this.
bigger ones and how they're presented and the smaller ones. I mean, I suspect there's no coming back from this one. I'm going to
I'm
send
going
this
to watch that.
recording directly to him. Whenever we publish this, I'm going to send this recording to him immediately because he probably needs it at this stage. Yeah,
I need to
he's
risk
got
it.
plenty of engagement on it.
Well, yeah, yeah. Someone was saying, is it time we introduced LinkedIn jail? And the answer is yes. And that's one for, that'll put you in a stint in LinkedIn jail.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know what was going on. Whether he was trying to just fucking say it and stand out, and in some ways zig
It
when other
definitely
people
stood
zag,
out.
and maybe do it and just applied it so badly, or whether he, I don't know. You'll have to read it and try.
I'm gonna
Come
look
back
at
to me and
yeah. And
try
that's
to
my
explain
third
what you think was
podcast
going on.
now.
Oh, only after I've offered him coaching services. Yeah, it's not a good one. So, um, okay, so um. what we're saying then, so just fucking say, get out there. If you is it a question then is if you feel as though that is what you should say, there's a reason behind that feeling. You're probably right. Why are you now going to dilute it into something which isn't necessarily going to work? There's your inclination could be the best way to follow. Just take a moment though, and then apply it well.
It's exactly that. It's follow your gut. And I think sometimes when you're working with, I say clients, but actually friends, if you've got a
Mm.
friend, they go, I'm having this difficult conversation with another friend. What I want to say is this. How do I put it more diplomatically? But you start with that. What I want to say is this. And that's the important part. If you can work out what you want to say, even unpolished, even raw, even a little bit too emotional or angry or sad, start from that point and then work out how you finesse the language.
Mm.
But if you have something to say, it is most of the time, I think, worth saying. One of the chapters in the book is around how to say no, which I think is something that my generation struggles with, and I think the generation below really struggle with it. And it's almost a disease, this saying yes to everything. And if you want to stay late every single night, then you'll just say yes and yes and yes. And so the antidote that I put forward is if you can't say no to your boss yet, start by saying no in day-to-day life. If you can't say no to your manager, say no at prep when they try and give you that extra napkin. I don't know if you've noticed this, but if ever you go to a prep, they give you maybe 2 or 3 napkins. I'm quite a messy eater. I still don't need that many napkins. You have to be really quick getting your no in because I think they're trained to just really pump out paper napkins to everyone. I mean, environment, all of that. Push back and just say, oh, no, thank you. I don't need this many napkins, and hand them back. And just as the act of asking, do you sell a book? Just fucking say it is a tiny act of rebellion. The act of saying, oh, no, thank you. I don't need that many napkins, but thank you so much for offering. It will just get you a little bit comfortable with a word. And then you can build up to those bigger challenges later on.
Okay, so I think you kind of preempted a question I was going to ask.
I'm magic.
Spooky. No. So I was going to say like about getting going,
Mm.
because people might look at what, let's say LinkedIn, because you're very visible on that and what you do, how you say stuff. I do agree. Other people where they might say, look, it's easy for you because you know how to say this. You're doing it. I pop up with my orange hat every week. I was just going back over your feed. You wrap yourself up in Christmas paper.
Things I
And
do.
other things. I mean, there are also some highly useful and very well thought out training type videos. But there's a deliberate mix, isn't there? But the wrapping yourself in paper or me with the orange hat on or putting a weird face, it's deliberate. I mean, normally it's deliberate. Sometimes it's a bit accidental, but it's a deliberate thing, yes. But people say, but it's easy for you. What you're saying is it will become easy for you if that's what you want to do and that's what makes sense for you to do, you've got to start at somewhere. Is that
Yeah,
the coaching advice?
absolutely. I think, you and I do, let's call it silly things on LinkedIn, because I think ultimately we're quite comfortable with our audience and we don't take ourselves very seriously and we enjoy it. But the advice is not, okay, so you need to go out and do the same, cover yourself in shaving foam or sit in a bath of baked beans for attention. Do
Are
what,
these coming up? I've not seen those
yeah,
ones, are they?
you can take all of those. That's the three. That's all yours now, Fred. Do what you feel comfortable with doing, but do something. Because if you don't do something, you will just be dormant. You will just go unnoticed for days, weeks, months, years. You don't need to wear bright colors at work unless that's your personality, but make sure the message you have gets across. That's the important thing for me. Don't worry about being outlandish with it. Don't worry about being wild with it. Just fucking say it.
And in some ways, to go from 0 to 100 miles an hour straight away, it
Mm.
would be a little bit incongruent, wouldn't it? It would be a bit weird. Yes, it would get attention, but it's like, what's going on there?
It
It's those
would,
smaller steps building towards.
I think, I hope what you and I do feels authentic to who we are. Oh, yeah, what a LinkedIn word.
Yeah.
Hashtag authentic.
I, I, I am so using that for the clip.
Feels very authentic to who we are. But it does. We, like I say, we don't mind being a bit silly. I quite like it. And of course, we enjoy the attention. And anyone who pretends they don't is lying. But you have to do what works for you. If it feels like you are doing something that jars with your identity, that jars with who you want to be, then it will feel disingenuous. And I think LinkedIn audiences are starting to smell that a mile off. We recently saw, back to our LinkedIn jail discussion, someone not just say, "Hey, I got married this weekend, isn't that great?" which would have gone down a storm. They decided to compare their engagement or their proposal to a merger or an acquisition or closing a deal. And it was really clunky. And yes, it got loads of attention. Was it the right attention? Who can say? But I would rather you had a go. I would rather you put something out there than you put nothing out there. If you put nothing out there and you're happy with that, fine, but you won't get much back. If you want to put something out there, do it, and I will show you how.
Well, that kind of clunky application of something, I actually don't mind too much. It's someone who's trying, who's having a go, but they've not, as opposed to, I'll go and buy a bunch of templates
Yeah,
off a LinkedIn coach who then tells you what to put and what kind of picture to put.
yeah.
And on some days, you literally see the same thing, the same message. Now, the message isn't
Trying
bad.
face.
The message has been written quite well. The person who
Yeah,
writes it understands this. It's just that 300 people have used it.
yeah, absolutely.
And they're stories, so they're lies, basically. Yeah, I rejected this applicant 4 times. Well, all of you did. Amazing. Poor applicant. Yeah. Um, yeah. What if what you do drives people away?
Hmm. It's a really interesting question. I have recently been.
It took me half an hour.
Yeah, suddenly I had no one left. It's going to happen. Not everyone is going to like you, and that is an audience's prerogative. They are more than welcome to do that. I think one piece of communication is Instagram. I was recently, my publisher said, let's try and increase your followers on Instagram because we know that's a good place for selling a book. I went, great. And one of the things, I got quite obsessive with it. And you because I was kind of starting from scratch, it was that process of throwing stuff at the wall, seeing what sticks. And it's always surprising. You think, oh, that's rubbish. That's an absolute pile of crap. And people go, oh, I really like this. And then, you do, I'm going to do 2 minutes on really golden pieces of advice, and your mum likes it. And that's about it. And you think it's probably only an accidental like anyway. So the whole thing is experimental. You have to try stuff. But I think there will always be, as I was kind of creeping towards that 10,000 mark, there are always going to be people who unfollow. And the thing is, initially I go, oh my God, looking at the data, what have I posted that they didn't like? What's the difference? Just let them. You can drive yourself crazy going through the data too carefully and just over analyzing what you're doing, because ultimately you start with this kind of quantity over quality approach. And then as you build, you want to turn more to quality. You are going to lose some people who don't want to be there. And in actual fact, that's a really good thing. Because if they didn't want to be there now, they're certainly not going to be the loyal followers 6, 12, 18 months down the line who really like your brand, who really like what you've got to say. So you have to accept there will be some people who it's not for them, and that's completely fine. It's to be expected.
I'd say it's a good thing, actually.
Yeah.
And maybe I've got, sales head on, and it's kind of like you can't be everything to everyone. So actually being very clear about who you're for, and you said followers, your group, your gang, your tribe.
Tribe.
Yeah.
That's another hashtag.
Yeah, well, I could cut that bit out. But yeah, the people you want to communicate to. And actually, if these guys don't get it, well, I don't really care. I'm not talking to you anyway.
That's
The
fine.
people
It has
here
to.
will definitely get it, and it will really have big impact. They might hate it. Well, actually, that's even going to better because they might like it more.
Yeah.
But if you're in the middle and a bit vanilla, it's just nobody's really bothered. Yeah.
That's the thing. No one's really bothered. You want people to be bothered.
Yeah. Slightly bothered.
Yeah.
That's just below interested,
A
isn't
little
it?
bit of
Slightly
bother.
bothered. How to get a little bit of bother in your audience. Yeah, the book for the not very high achiever. No, so let's go back to the book then, because it is for people who want to make a difference. And we've kind of gone off in a little bit kind of specialist. What haven't I asked you about the book I should ask? God, that's a lazy question, isn't it?
I have a feeling if the book sells a copy, which it might, fingers crossed, I'm going to be asked, why did you write this? So I will answer any other question other than that.
Oh, that's why I didn't ask it, because you're going as you get on the publicity trail, is why did you write it and all that sort of stuff.
Answering that, yeah.
You've got to give a different answer every time.
Yeah.
I mean, that's going to do nothing to give people a sense of who you are, because like, you just say something different every time. Worst communication ever. Yeah, but I'm amusing myself. God, it's that time. Right. Okay. So, I think we've touched on people getting started. Let's just sort of finish up on being very clear on that, because we were having a bit of a giggle and jumping around a bit on that. But sort of getting started, you're thinking, I do want to say stuff. I think I've got something interesting to say, but I'm just teetering. Come on, what's going to give them that little nudge?
There is a blueprint print or a formula for everything, and it is available. And I'm not puritanical. I think, you could even ask ChatGPT. I would never ask ChatGPT to write your best man speech or your next presentation, but you could ask it for a formula. You could ask a book, or you could ask, the good old fashioned internet just for an answer for a formula. As with all things, break it down into steps. And that's what I've tried to do in the book. I've described the book as a Haynes manual. And then my publisher said, no one really knows what a Haynes manual is anymore because it's 2025. So I had to take it out. But it's a Haynes manual for public speaking. I think that's what you want to do. We find it very easy to put together IKEA furniture, I hope. And the reason I think we find it easy to put together IKEA furniture is the manual is crystal clear. These are the tools you need. This is how you put it together. It should look like this picture on the front of the box. Bizarrely, public speaking is the same. It feels like it should be this poetic thing, but there is a formula that you can follow. Follow the formula and then add your own stuff, your own emotions on top. If you do all of that and you remove this idea that it has to be perfect, or even that it has to be good, you will find suddenly something happens. And I think that's probably the first step. Stop telling yourself this has to be good, because that is the number one thing that seems to trip my clients up when they're having a difficult conversation, giving feedback, doing a TED style presentation. They tell themselves this has to be really good. And they mentally set that bar very high. And I promise you, now you've set that bar that high, you are never going to clear it. If you tell yourself, do you know what? This doesn't have to be good. This just has to be. And it's going to be clunky, it's going to be awkward, but it's going to exist in one format or another. That is a much better start than holding yourself accountable to a 10 out of 10, because a 10 out of 10 doesn't exist.
Awesome stuff. I'm not going to spoil it by adding anything into that. Apart from asking you, so where can people get in touch with you? I mean, you dropped a couple of hints on here, so see what you're doing.
You are anyone listening who wants to talk to me is more than welcome to ping me a message on LinkedIn or Instagram, or even for those of you who are under the age of 20, TikTok. So I am out there in the public space. If you want to buy the book, your local bookseller will sell it. Waterstones have even said they might put it in the window. So that's pretty exciting.
Goodness gracious.
I know.
Okay, so
If they don't,
we
I'll
will.
break in and put it in myself.
There is that one, isn't there? The airport. Every
Yeah,
time you go on
gorilla.
holiday.
Yeah, free travel.
Not done that.
No.
I did get someone to take a photo of me reading my own book on a plane.
Oh, look at this stranger I've encountered.
Then they got that's you on the back of it. Yeah.
Oh,
But then
please.
that became a funny post. The post
Yeah.
was more funny that the person's reading his own book on the plane. What's wrong with the guy? Brilliant. We will put links to those in the show notes so people can come straight through. And yeah, please mention that you heard us chat on this podcast. If you do get in touch with us, thank you so much for coming on and sharing some thoughts. Fun as ever.
Yeah, we have a laugh.
Thank you for listening to the Sales Today podcast with me, your host, Fred Copestake. I hope you've enjoyed what you heard today. If you did, please get in touch and hit subscribe. And remember, you can take the Collaborative Selling Scorecard for free to check out how your sales approach works in today's environment. You'll find it in the show notes.